So we're looking for answers on how we can do work that looks fundamentally different. And Bob gave this book called Biomimicry. Basically what it talks about, if we're really looking for the next set of answers, look at how nature makes things. And there's never been a better model for how to do things with genius than the natural processes that exist. And right now, I did get through the introduction, David, so yeah, I did get through the introduction. One of the points that she brings out is one of man's first great biomimicry inventions, which is flight. That within just over a decade, we used that invention to drop bombs on other human beings. So it's this whole danger of what man does with the technologies available and other resources.
Well, there's I'd be happy to give you a list afterwards of about 10 books to read, but Ray Anderson, Paul Hawken, Amory Lovins, David Godfrey. I mean, there's just some incredible books out there that there's no how to do green buildings necessarily, but there are people that can inspire you to think, and that's what it's all about, thinking about how to just do things.
To emphasize this point, 2 green builds ago, I wanted to hear a guy named Karan Grover speak, and I heard that he had the highest rated lead project on planet Earth. So I got to go hear Karan speak. He never mentioned anything about like studying out the lead process. He talked about a spiritual conviction about how you do your work. It was completely spiritual talk. And at the end, he said, we ended up the points of we had the highest scoring project in the world. And I thought that was really interesting, that there's something profound about that.
Your book has many triangular filtered gases, and I wondered how do you address the problem of window washing and leak buildup?
We actually did a full wind tunnel mock-up, model building, and did thermal analysis, testing ice buildup, prevailing winds, temperature changes. And to answer the first on ice sheeting, there was actually a whole scientific study done on ice sheeting on this shape and form. And the northeast face of the building will actually have 2-inch tall stainless steel pins to break up any ice sheet that could come off and fly as a sheet. And that was the one area where the experts told us that this is a place where the sun won't melt it fast enough, and that the heat loss through the building won't melt it fast enough. And we need to address that. And as far as window washing is concerned, we actually have 3 extremely large window washing equipment rigs, which are basically cranes. They rise up out of the screen wall and they boom out and they swirl around. Because if you imagine if you put a piece of window washing equipment in track from the facade and has to travel like this and then edge the corner, the cables which tie that back would then be cutting through our building. So the boom actually has to travel out and drop the cable straight so they're not slapping up against the glass. And it should be pretty interesting to see. I think it might be one of the most interesting window washing equipment products.
Imagine that WANADS wanted someone willing to ride in a very small little platform, 950 feet in the air, and dangle there until you get in liaisons and tracks about 100 feet below.
Great job as volunteers.
Yes.
First of all, I'm glad to hear that you're using the Spire as a telecommunications device rather than tether clips. But I actually have 3 questions, and you can answer any or all of them. First of all, serviceability, because having been involved in some green projects on a much smaller basis. The quality of life is demonstrable. The serviceability issues remain, at least in those small projects. The second question is, going back to the beginning of this presentation, which was astounding presentation. Thank you so much. And it's a question that's been asked before. I'm just wondering your take on it. How do we, after 250 years of industrial development, tell developing countries, okay, we've developed and we've done all this for the world, and now we're at a crisis point. You guys have to slow down. That's the second question. The third question is, you've described both practically and spiritually why this is such a wonderful movement. Indeed, it is. There are architects from an earlier generation, like Richard Rogers, who are now having to answer for their progressive views. In this country, it's done by a patron and visionary architects. Where is the urban planning in this country, the central urban planning that brings green architecture forth on a sort of synergistic level, national level?
Take any two you want.
Right.
I think on the serviceability issue, anytime there's something new, you learn a lot. Adrian Lucas here from Stephen Winter is probably the world's expert on systems tried and how they perform. We have a project in Lower Manhattan that's completely heated and cooled by 10 geothermal wells. We're learning things every day. Like any tool that you use, the first time around, by the time you're done using the tool, you stop and say, gee, if I had done this and I had done this differently, it might work better the next time. And that's how we continue to refine things. That we are actually, somebody said, I don't know if it was Rick Pedrizzi, somebody said to me that the green building movement is kitty hawk 4 feet off the ground. That we're learning things, and we have to start someplace. So right now we're learning a lot about geothermals. It's our third or fourth geothermal project, but we're still learning a lot of things. And the other projects that have gone before us, the Wayne Street project that you know about, they learned a lot there. The Center for Architecture has a geothermal up and running, and we're learning each step of the way. So I think as we continue to use these things, we'll continue to learn more and be better educated, so we don't repeat mistakes like the use of any tool. And then you said all this to the world. What was your question again?
More insight. Well, your question about what do we tell developing countries? We are 5% of the world's population. We consume 25% of the world's resources. In addition to the people in China migrating from the country to the city. On a global scale, there are 1 million people a week moving from the country to the city. And they all want what we have. I'm not going to tell them they can't have it. But the marketplace certainly will, because there's not enough to go around. It just won't work. And what it also means for us and for our children, that they are not going to be able to have what we had. I was talking to Carol Christie earlier, and we were talking about the same thing. You know, we live, those of us who are somewhat on in years, have lived in a very fortunate time because we never really thought about doing without. Some of us did with less at some points in our lives and with more. But this is a huge problem. This is huge.
The other issue that we thought a lot about that we didn't mention is we set a very bad standard. There's no question about that. We're a consumer standard. So one of the thoughts is, do we have an obligation to set another standard? I mean, we're on the next generation. So if we can set a better standard, and if we look now, China's getting quite realistic about how much resources it will take for them to manage their society, and they're looking for setting better standards than we have. Our standards don't work. The math doesn't work. 5%, 25%. It's not going to work. They're very smart and know that. So if we can set higher standards, use the Vernacular term, we can set a new standard, as opposed to saying you can't have what we had. Please don't repeat our mistakes. Let's see if we can help not repeat the same mistakes. Richard Rodgers.
Well,
I've heard of him.
I'm just wondering, no, you basically answered it. I mean, you can't tell Bush how to plan his world. I mean, he's global warming is a great economic opportunity. The question is, even more narrowly than talking to the developing world, the rest of the developed world has central planning, by and large, in terms of urban architecture. We don't even have that. You're the planning board.
But it's starting. I mean, it's the easiest thing in the world to sit up here and Bush finish. I mean, I was at an NREC and they use Satan and Bush in interchangeable terms. So that's easy, but it's not all just politics. Pataki's been very good for the environment, and Bob was involved in legislation down at Battery Park City, which said to plan this area now, you need to perform at these standards. So I probably should talk about it.
Well, Tim Carey, in 1999, started a team of us, and he was part of our team, to write the guidelines for all new buildings that will be built in Battery Park City. And essentially, they're required to get a LEED Gold standard, LEED Gold rating, which is really tough to do. This is not something you're going to do every day. So all of the new buildings, which will total 5 million square feet on 96 acres of Battery Park City, are going to be LEED Gold. Probably the largest concentration of LEED Gold buildings anywhere for a long time. They are now, and that will fill up when those buildings all get built, which will probably be within the next 3 years. The new Goldman Sachs headquarters is going to be one of those buildings. When they are finished, or now, Battery Park City is looking at how do they make all of their existing buildings very green. So they get it.
Let me just mention without the microphone that everybody should come back on April 5th when, in fact, people from Battery Park City, including Jim Kavanaugh, who's the new president following Tim Carey, and Rocco Kelly and Russell Albany, one of the developers for three of the projects, will talk about the experience and new buildings going forward.
I would totally recommend that. Russell Albany's, who was the second generation in his family to build buildings, didn't understand what this green stuff was all about. But he was the first one to bid on a project doing the new Battery Park City guidelines. And he got it. And now the buildings that his family is building that are not in Battery Park City are following the same guidelines as required in Battery Park City. He's terrific. I would really recommend you listen to him.
I'll follow up on that. When Green first came to Battery Park City, Albanese and others said that it cost 12%, 17% more to build it, but don't worry, it's getting cheaper as time goes on, and they'll be able to charge more rent or sell for more, therefore it will pay for itself. How do you make the equation if you're talking to a new client for a new office building in terms of what the costs are for this form of innovation, how it can pay off for them over time, to amortize itself, and what is the equivalent argument that would help somebody to convince a new client to go this way?
This is pretty easy for a corporation. If you're doing corporate headquarters, the corporation will certainly invest in energy-saving equipment, in a better thermal envelope, and in opportunities for their employees to be more productive. If you're talking to a developer, this is what makes the DERS so special. The developers spend the money to save it, in the case of the DERS, to save energy and to make a better work environment. And the people who save the money on the energy are the tenants. So there is no payback. There is no direct monetary payback in the pockets of a developer doing this. But the DERS are doing it because they feel it's real simple. It's the right thing to do. There's no other way to build a building. The benefit that they perhaps will realize that their buildings will rent for more money in a time when people are moving out of buildings, when the economy is going in a downhill spiral, that their tenants will stay there rather than move out. payback for a developer. But the other thing we're finding is that the costs of doing some of these things are going down. The equipment that is going into One Bryant Park wasn't available before Times Square. Yeah, LEED is not just about saving energy and saving water. It's about the entire building process. So if you drive a truck down a ramp and it's raining and the truck is all covered with mud, you need to wash that off and have all that mud stay in your site. You can't track it down the city streets because it's invariably going to go into the storm system. We have, in our specifications, we have made it a requirement of all the suppliers to tell us how much recycled content they have in all of their materials. And they have to document it. They have to give us, if there's 4,000 boards of sheetrock, how much recycled content is in it, where did it come from? And if they're bringing anything on the site that they're not going to actually build into the building, what are they going to do with it when they take it away? How are we going to recycle what the container is or whatever? There's also in our specifications that you can't bring any products, sealants and paints and adhesives that have volatile organic compounds. So that is all documented and monitored. So LEED has actually developed, is forcing the construction world to develop some very good habits.
Well, on the same point, there's been much discussion in architectural circles about sort of the virtues of LEED, but also the privileging non-urban sites with the kind of guidelines with the point system that exists now. Is there anything that you could recommend for your project, since we got the ear of some of the officials here, for a more urban-friendly or more urban-fair LEED?
Well, LEED in the beginning was designed, and this is me speaking, I'm not a representative of the LEED, of the people who designed LEED, which I would say, I think is probably the most important thing to happen in the green movement period, is LEED. But in my opinion, the original design, LEED 1.0, was for a 3-story building in the burbs. That being said, there are points that we can get at One Bryant Park that you can't get in the burbs. We get a point for being near mass transit. We get a point for developing in an area where there's a lot of other density. So if you have a 3-story building in the burbs, there's 2 points you just can't possibly get. So, but LEED is constantly being revised. And there are now lots of different, there used to be one-size-fits-all LEED. There is now LEED for existing buildings. There is LEED for neighborhood developments, LEED for commercial interiors, LEED for core and shell. What we're doing at One Bryant Park is LEED core and shell. We're not doing LEED whole building because what our role in this project is we're designing the outside of the building and all the inner workings. We're not designing where all the tenants are going to be spending their time in the building. There are also guides that you can use if you have a particular kind of product like a hospital. So the opportunity to LEED is trying to look at all kinds of projects and make it a tool for almost any kind of building. But it's constantly under revision. And their attitude is not this is not a penal system. This is a how do we learn from the industry? How do we learn from our peers? How do we make this better? Mr. Federici, the last word. For those of you who don't know, this gentleman, Rick Federici, he is the President and CEO of the U.S. Green Building Council, and it's probably appropriate at this discussion that he does have the last word. No question.
This is absolutely a question. I just want to know, in a core and shell building like the American Tower, does the building in the future leasing agents, is there any plan in place to help educate them to try to lease the space with the encouragement of building out their spaces here?
This is a tough one. Another big point is that if you, and actually I think at 4 Times Square, I think we actually started to lead people thinking about this, because we developed a little booklet for the tenants to show them, to tell them what our building was all about and how they could best take advantage of it, and how they could use our thinking in making their spaces greener. So you get a point if you have a tenant manual. So yes, we will be producing a tenant manual that will describe all the things that we talked about and more, and give them the resources that they can go to for carpet, for furniture, for paint, for all of the products that they would be using in their space, the right kind of lighting, so that we want to make it easy for them. The good thing is that this whole notion of how buildings should be built is catching on. More and more people know about it, so we have fewer people that are looking at some of these things for the first time and saying, wow, I didn't know that. So, yes, the goal of our team is to make it very easy for people to A, copy us, and B, learn from what we've